Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to the Eternal set review for Dark Frontier with the fourth and final part of the Primal cards, including of course the much desired top 5 Primal cards. And before we hop into the rest of the Primal cards, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content. And now onto the cards. Alright, first we have Hold Under, a limited only card. The 5-cost warp spell and deals damage to an enemy unit equal to the highest attack among your units. So kind of a bit similar to Killer, except that your unit is not at risk, so that helps. But it's also obviously much more expensive. But in limited, this seems like a surprisingly decent removal for a Primal deck, especially if paired with the right colors to have big enough units, like for example with Time. So yeah, basically just make sure that you check what your biggest units are and how likely you are to deal how much damage to evaluate how good this is going to be in your deck and how many you want. But all in all, a pretty solid limited removal for Primal, I would say. Next we have Keen Saddleback, 5-cost 4/4 flyer. That alone is great in limited, not a constructed card though. And alternatively you can shift it to give one of your other units flying until Keen Saddleback emerges, and you can already shift it on turn 3, so you have it ready on turn 6 to attack, which is amazing, and in the meantime it even does stuff for you. So yeah, this is possibly the best of the cycle. Like the other ones that we looked at, there were a couple of good ones, like the green one is really strong too, but it's much better for its like shift effect than as a unit. It's pretty underwhelming. While this is like an amazing unit that you can even play for cheaper and get value out of in the process, this card is just a limited powerhouse, so would be happy to first pick this. Next we have Mass Polymorph. As I already mentioned when we talked about Vargo's Pelt, this card combos nicely with Vargo's Pelt. I think outside of Vargo's Pelt, the card is a bit iffy. It has Warp that definitely adds some value to it, but as we all know in Constructed, we already play like units that are way ahead of their curve most of the time. So transforming them into a unit 1 cost higher often means that they are being downgraded on average. Sure, you can still high roll and get a good unit cost higher, but more often than not, you're gonna get something that is weaker than the 1 cost lower unit you had. So without Vargo's Pelt, I think this card is just, on average, downgrading your board more often than not. And Vargo's Pelt is needed to make sure that you actually get an upgrade to your board in terms of stats and stuff. So the card is mostly like kind of a cool, fun tool rather than an actually good card. And the same sort of goes for Limited. In Limited it's a bit better because the average unit you have is going to be much weaker, and upgrading them to 1 cost higher is going to yield much higher increase in quality, so in limited this seems more reasonable to play. Next we have Rust, the Walking Glacier. We already talked about the others of the cycle. This is a solid card of the cycle, not one of the top cards, but definitely better than the Time one. The main problem here I think is that it costs 5 Primal, which means you would have to be primarily Primal, which is something you usually just don't want to be, since Primal is more of a support than a primary color. And the crests and the insignias that we have so far are Huru and Feln. In Feln, it makes some sense, given that you also want 5 Primal anyway for Champion of Cunning, but then you're already running like 8 5-drops, which is a lot. And in Huru, you just want to be like control deck, or if you want to go heavy 1 color, it's going to be Justice because they are the better cards, and CDT is also the better quintuple influence. In Limited, as usual, I don't think they are particularly supportable, but all in all the card is fairly strong, just has the issues of like kind of not fitting that well anywhere. Next we have Cloud Snake Matriarch, another pretty nice limited card. It's a 6-cost 5/4 flying warp, which in its own right is already very powerful and limited. And when you warp a card, including Cloud Snake Matriarch, you draw a card. So if you ever warp this, it's basically not a 2-for-1, it's a 3-for-1 that has the potential to generate more advantage. This card is really, really powerful. Another premium uncommon in Primal, really. Next we have Diving Pteriax, 6 cost, 2/4 flying, and with Onslaught it deals 2 damage to an enemy, which is decent, but all in all I feel like the card is a bit underwhelming for the cost. The fact that it's flying, has a decent health to block, and might kill something small or finish something small something big post-combat, makes it a decent card, but not a great card. I think like 6 for what it does is still quite a lot, but seems like a fine playable at least. Next we have Tamari's Earthshaker, a 6 cost 4/6 flyer, another card that is amazing in limited, and in constructed it's just a bit too weak, but in constructed it would be more like the shift 3, deal 1 damage to each enemy unit without flying, but if you want this kind of effect you rather just play dedicated cards that do that better, like Lightning Storm or Hailstorm. So I don't see making this in constructed, but in limited this is quite a powerhouse, another bomb, primal top-end flying bomb basically. Next we have Snowmass Jotun. It's a 7 cost 5/7, which is alright, not that great, but alright. It has warp, so every time you warp it, it's an amazing card. If you don't warp it, it's underwhelming, but the fact that it has shift 5 makes it a lot more warpable than normal, simply because, well, yeah, you can already warp it on turn 5 and turn 6 if you have 5 power, and can even warp it later without the shift. So the shift basically just makes the warp a bit better, since it gives you more chances to warp it and gain value. So in limited, I guess one-off as like a curve topper could be fine. It's still not a great card though. It's just a bit small for the cost. For 7 you kind of expect something more game winning. And in constructed is obviously unplayable. And last but not least we have Terror on the Mountain. Another warp fatty, a better one than the last one. 7 cost 6/6 warp. We have a shift 6 here once again to make the warp a bit earlier accessible. And when you warp a card, you stun an enemy unit, including Terror on the Mountain, warping itself. So yeah, just gives you some nice kind of top end momentum, especially warping this and stunning something even with shift is really, really strong and a nice swing. So another pretty strong top end card for limited here. Not constructed playable though, really. Alright, so time to take a look at the top 5 cards in Primal. It was a bit harder this time, I think. Once again, we had that a fair share in the past in other sets. Primal often has a hard time scraping together like 5 good cards. But let's take a look. So first off we have Ice Bolt. I don't think Ice Bolt is great, but it's an important tool in the kit of Primal. Depending on what colors you pair it with, you're going to be happy that you have access to Ice Bolt rather than not having many removal options at all, even though Ice Bolt has a severe cost to it. Next we have Royal Decree, a very nice disruptive tool for Primal that kind of is an improved version of Rain of Frogs in a way, and yeah, definitely a nice tool, mostly a market card I think, but quite good. In the right decks at least. And next we have Swift Refusal. This card is a bit innocuous, but I think the card is actually a really big deal. As I explained when we talked about the card, 1 cost counters that counter expensive, high impact cards, and the majority of spells you need to stop are non-fast. The fast spells are mostly like tricks and removal, which is not that impactful and just usually trading 1 for 1, so you can just let it happen. So yeah, Swift Refusal, a great addition to markets and even main decks in certain Primal decks. Then we have Rust, the Walking Glacier, a fairly powerful unit, but in a way comparable to Magto, but yeah, suffering from the issue of being very restrictive and not really having a deck that wants it right now. And then we're already like kind of getting pretty low here with Sadrok's Masterwork, which is a great addition for exactly one archetype, the Yeti, the Skycrack Yeti deck. and outside of that, it's basically irrelevant. And even that deck is not a top tier deck. So yeah, that's kind of how thin we got already. And then as an honorable mention, I wanted to add Reread, simply because it offers up some possibilities in especially Primal control deck building to get virtual extra copies of, say, a market card and stuff like that. The card is quite expensive for what it does and it's not that great, but it's also fairly unique in what it does and offers up some possibilities that you otherwise wouldn't have, which is why I feel like it's worth mentioning here. Alright, this concludes part 4 of the Primal series. I'll be moving on to the Shadow cards and try to wrap these up ASAP, so we get this set review done. That's it again for this time. If you enjoyed the series, hit the like button, share it with your friends, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, turn on notification icon to not miss out on new content, and please consider whitelisting EternalTitans.com and YouTube on your adblock. That would really help a lot. Alright, thanks for watching everyone. I'm your host ManuS. I see you next time. Bye.